Welcome to Live Into Your Best Life, a show where people learn how to go from where they are to where they'd like to be in any area of life. If you're looking for a new job, wanting to improve your relationships, or even reclaim your health, Skaya will share with you a simple formula that can take you on a journey to begin to live into your best life in all areas of life. Now sit back and begin your journey.
Hello, and welcome to Live Into Your Best Life. I'm Skaya, your show's host, and today I'm here with Steven Puri. So, Steven, I'm going to read your bio, and then I'm going to maybe embellish a little, because I do that.
Okay, here we go.
So Steven is the founder and CEO of the Sukha Company, with the mission to help millions of people find their focus, achieve more, and have a healthy work life. Steven's career started as a newscaster interviewer for the #1 youth news show in the DC Baltimore market. He was on WTTG TV. And then he also worked as a junior software engineer. And I'm curious about this. You were a Thomas J. Watson Scholar at IBM. So we're going to touch base on what is that, because it sounds quite impressive. After attending USC in Los Angeles, he began working in film production and produced computer-generated visual effects for 14 movies, including Independence Day, which I absolutely loved, and that won an Academy Award for visual effects. And so it'll be interesting because I love that movie, and it seems really groundbreaking, especially for the time. And so that'll be fun to dive into. Steven's first tech company was Centropolis Effects that produced those CGI effects, and he eventually sold it to the German media conglomerate DasWork when he was only 28 years old. So very impressive. Steven then produced some indie films and eventually went studio side to develop and produce live action features as a VP of development and production at 20th Century Fox, running the Die Hard and the Wolverine franchises. When you first reached out to me, I'm like, I like this guy. I read that. I'm like, I really like this guy because love them. And he was an EVP at DreamWorks Pictures for Kreutzmann Orsi Productions, where he worked on, again, love these, Star Trek, Transformers, and more. Guy after my heart. After Fox, Steven returned to building tech companies and founded the Sukha Company. Sukha means happiness from self-fulfillment in Sanskrit. The Sukha is a focus app that bundles all the tools necessary to have a focused experience and a healthy, productive workday. Steven lives in Austin, Texas right now with his lovely wife.
This is true.
Very cool. So
it's so funny hearing your own bio. You're like, oh, wow.
Quite a journey you've been on.
It
very
is quite
cool.
a ride I'm on. I know. I feel very lucky.
Nice. All right. First, tell me this Thomas J. Watson Scholar. So what's that all about?
So what that about is I'm actually the son of 2 engineers.
Okay.
My mom was a software engineer at IBM back before there were a lot of female software engineers.
Yep.
And my dad was a hardware engineer. He designed very large-scale integrated circuits, like CPU chips for IBM. They met at IBM, shockingly.
Okay.
An IBM kid born in upstate New York near one of the IBM design facilities. So when I got to the age that I was in high school, there is a scholarship that IBM offers to children of employees. And I applied for it. I was very lucky that I applied for it, even with the acknowledgement did not intend to be an engineer, even though I had, at that time, my mom had taught me how to code. But I was like, I think what I want to do is actually maybe something that's broader than just being a software engineer. And they were super cool. They're like, you know what? Go into the world. We'll help you out. And they gave me a 4-year scholarship in addition to USC scholarship. Yeah, so that's what it was. Thomas J. Watson was one of the founders of this IBM.
Okay, very cool.
I believe in recording.
And your background, you've got a lot of the fact that your parents are engineers. You came out wired, right? There was no choice. You were going to be doing, but obviously you're very creative, which a lot of people don't realize that engineers are very creative people.
Yes.
they tend to like a little bit more structure than some of the folks that do the random art types of things. And so and you blended the two, which is really cool.
Yeah, my dad has 74 patents to his name, all on innovative ways to do like transistor designs and large scale integrated circuits. And that was super cool because I remember when I was little, my dad would come home with essentially certificates from the government patent office and stuff like that. And I didn't realize what that meant when you're 8 years old or 10 years old. But then once I like got to college and like friends were engineers, I realized, oh wow, there is, like you said, a lot of creativity in saying like, how could I create a circuit that does this with fewer transistors, with a smaller substrate, things like that. Mm-hmm. And that is a different kind of creativity than what we normally associate with, oh, he's a painter. Oh, yep. He writes screenplays.
Exactly. And it was funny, in December, I was at a networking event and they wanted to know, what's the most recent thing you've created? And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I haven't really created, because I was thinking painting or stuff like that. We do a lot of arts and crafts and yada. I crochet a lot, and all of a sudden I'm like, I published a few books this last year. But you don't think of it. So anyway, yeah, it's fun.
One of my favorite birthdays was, I am very lucky at this point in my life. I have a lot of the experiences that I want to have. I have a fantastic wife. I've got a lot of the things. Like I don't need a jet or anything like that, but I've got other things. So I had a birthday party. I said to my friends, listen, I want you to come, but don't bring me anything that you could buy. I would love it if you feel impelled to bring a gift, something that you created. And people brought food, poetry. One person made handmade cocktail coasters. There's all these things of just, I never would have gotten that. No one would have gone to the store and said, I bought you a poem.
Yep. I love that.
I think that's my favorite birthday, because you just got interesting things. It was like, only I could make this, and I only made it for you.
I love that. I'm the same, because it means more. Like, you have to actually, my son's wife gave me she made an Afghan for me for Christmas. And then for my birthday, she made these really cool, they're bookmarks, but they're corner covers. So instead of dog-earing you put this on the corner, and she sewed them. And when you were talking, I'm like, I love those gifts. And really cool. That's fun. So how did you get involved in all the visual effects stuff?
The funny thing, because as you mentioned, and it's really odd thinking about these things that happened years ago. So I had done this TV show in DC. There was a fun youth show. It was basically a news show for young people, right? Mm-hmm. And when I went to USC, they were very interested in me continuing down like some career being a newscaster, interview, that sort of thing. I had also learned to code because that's what mom did, and she and I were very close, and sort of picked it up. Yep. So I'm in LA, and I happened to be there, and this is one of those lucky accidents. There is no planning to this. A lot of my life has been just right place, right time. Mm-hmm. And right when film was going digital, and suddenly people were like, oh my God, for years, this has been this photochemical process of shooting things on acetate film and trying to manipulate them. And suddenly it was like Lucasfilm and these other places were like, what if we scanned it and just made it a digital process? And I happened to understand the digital part, the computer side, well. But I also had enough ability to talk to a director or a producer about their movie that I had a lot of friends who were in cinema TV, because USC is a big cinema TV school. And I passed backwards into this because I at that nexus of, you could talk to someone and you can code, I was there. And that was really fun, because a rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. I was one of those boats, and the industry exploded. And that time met Roland and Dean, and we did Independence Day and Godzilla and other stuff together.
That's really cool. Okay, so what's the favorite movie you've worked on?
Probably, and this is not a movie I developed. This is a movie I worked on in CG, because later I developed films, mm-hmm. and there were some films I'm very proud of. But I'll tell you, probably the best film I worked on was Braveheart, mm-hmm. where we were producing, at that time, I was a producer producing visual effects as well as title sequences and things like that, like pieces of people's movies. And Mel Gibson, and this is back in the 90s, right? He and his partner got into a deal with Warner Brothers, and they really wanted to transition Mel from being just the star of Lethal Weapon, the star of these movies, into being a producer. And So we had appealed, we had written to them saying, hey, we know that this is your future. We happen to make really high-end, beautiful title sequences and effects. So if you ever need us, please call us. It's a sales solicitation letter, but also we're fans and we're here for you, right?
Yeah.
And got to know Mel over the next couple of years. So he had called us up and we'd gotten a copy of this script, Braveheart, that he wanted to direct, and he did not want to star it. His thing was like, people will think I only got to direct it because I starred in it, so I want to only direct it and hire someone else as the star. So I'm clearly the director, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're in development or you're in below the line production, you read a lot of scripts. It is the roadmap for what's going to get made, what needs to be done to make the movie, the whole thing. So every night when you're working on visual effects, you take home however many scripts you can read a night, and you're scanning them. And I remember picking up Braveheart. It was like a Tuesday night, and it was a long script. It was like 160, 170 some odd pages, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, I didn't really know that much about it. I didn't know what Braveheart referred to. I was like, let me scan through enough of this that I have a sense of it tomorrow. Just sort of look through it and be like, okay, gotcha, period thing, people on horses, stuff like that, got it. And I could not go to sleep until I finished it. I was up at 2 a.m, read the entire thing. And I was like, we need to do whatever we need to do this movie, even though it's not a big visual effects flash movie. It's period. A lot of what we did were CG crowds of soldiers because you couldn't get 5,000 extras, like removing modern telephone poles from big battlefields, things like that. And we did everything we could to get that movie, and we got it. We ended up doing 2 movies with him, as well as producing the title sequence for his production company called Icon.
Okay.
So it became a really interesting thing. But I remember watching that movie when it was even in a rough cut, and it just hit me in the center of my chest. It was about something. And I love that, because a lot of effects movies that pay our bills when I was doing that, they're about the effects, or they're about the monster. They're marketed based on, look, the White House blows up, or look, this thing happens. And Braveheart was about like, this is a story about what are you willing to do for freedom?
Yep, exactly. And another movie that we absolutely love. When my husband and I were just hanging out in our friendship phase of before we really started dating, he was introducing me to, he was introducing me to all the movies that he absolutely loved, and Braveheart was one of them that we've probably watched 3 or 4 times, because it's a long one, but it is amazing. And and every time you see it in a different light, depending on where you are in your life. And as you were talking, like, you know what? I never thought about that. Yeah, because sometimes you think about, like, how do they get so many people together? Oh, got it. Because it's Queen, right? The Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie.
Yeah.
And when they did the Live Aid and that scene and all the people and how and that was a big conversation we bought the movie, and there was here's how we put it together stuff. And that was so fascinating to me. And now you're bringing to life, this makes even so much more sense. So very cool. I love it.
It was awesome to work on that. And I'll tell you, when you do visual effects, a lot of those movies are marketed on the visual effects. Look how cool the Avengers is going to be. This creature is going to come out of the earth. And the thing with Braveheart is Braveheart won the Academy Award for cinematography. John Toll, who's an amazing cinematographer, won an Oscar. Yeah. And we felt very proud of that, because we contributed a lot of the effects that made the cinematography possible.
Nice. You brought it to life.
Yeah, it wasn't like showing off the effects. It was rather, how beautifully can you do these effects that everyone thinks he was just shot it this way. All the soldiers are real. All those battles and landscapes and castles and stuff are not paintings done in digital. They were real castles. And you can't, Braveheart's budget, you can't hire all those people and build those castles and remove all those cell phone towers. So it was amazing work with John, because he is like one of the great cinematographers, and he won for that. And we were like, we felt very proud.
And you were part of that. That is so cool.
Tiny bumps, tiny moves. Thousands of people make a movie. I was one of them.
But that's really cool. And as you're talking about it, because my husband and I watch a lot of different types of movies, but we really love action flicks. And so Avengers and Transformers and all the things, right? Like your Die Hard and everything. Yeah. And we talk about some of those fight scenes and how my daughter, one of her best friends, is in the ballet. And the work to choreograph some of those interpretations and such. And we talk about in the movies how that it's just so beautiful in those fight scenes. And if someone just misses, oh, they're just going to really get punched. And then listening to you talk about it, it's like, oh, so how much of those types of things are actually digital, or how does that digital work enhance what we're actually seeing? Because now you're totally making now next time I'm gonna be like, oh, this is how that's done, right? I'm going to go analytical on it. But how does that work?
So when you think of the evolution of in the photochemical days when you were shooting on film, right?
Yeah.
So what you're talking about, that sort of like ballet-like choreography of a fight scene where it's, okay, we're going to work this out in slow motion, and you're going to punch here, you will move your head, but it'll look from this camera angle like you got all that kind of thing from ye olden days, right?
Yes.
You think about that to now, where you're basically talking about creating it in the computer. Like, you may not even use live actors. You may be like, we can not only create this computer faster and cheaper, but if we ever want to re-choreograph it or have a new camera angle, we don't have to call everyone and go back to set. We can literally just do it that afternoon. So going forward, as opposed to 50 years ago, it's astounding to think how that's evolved, because yes, those interim steps were, okay, we're going to do it on film, but we're going to use like a green screen or a blue screen, and we'll have to composite you together. And then doing the same thing digitally. And then that was those awkward conversations about, okay, Paulie, so you're not going to be able to see the creature hitting you. So we're going to put this tennis ball here. So your eye line, if you could focus on the tennis ball, it will later look like you're looking at the, but if you could just pretend that tennis ball is a huge monster, that'd be really great. And then later it's all put together and you're like, oh, that worked, or it didn't. But yeah, going forward, the answer to your question is, imagine that flexibility when you're a director to be like, let's do this. And if we want to change something, we'll just go in and tweak it a little bit. And we don't need to call anybody. Nobody has to go back to set. No actors have to be called off their next production to come back and do a reshoot day for us.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Okay, so doing all the digital work, we are big. So I've got two grands, right? They're 6 and 3. Yep. And when my kids were little, we always have watched Pixar, DreamWorks, all the things.
There are some great films out there,
yeah. How did you get into DreamWorks, and what was your favorite, what made it fun?
I'll tell you, being out of film now, there are two things that I miss. Because people are sometimes like, oh, do you miss the premieres? Do you miss it? Honestly, after you've been to 2 dozen premieres, they're a work event. It's like going to a conference in your business where it's all the same people, all holding their little drinks, talking about, hey, what are you doing? No, it's scripted. Like, the first one is, this is amazing. Oh my God, I'm in Hollywood. The 50th one, you're like, oh God, tonight I've got to be out until 11 o'clock and watch that movie. And then there's a red carpet and it's going to go on forever, right? So a lot of that I don't miss. When people ask me, what do you miss about them? There are two things I miss. One, I was very lucky that my career worked where I ended up working with probably about a dozen of the top action writers. Like the guys and one girl who are paid $1 million or more. They're often called in with the studios, let us make this movie, but we need a pro to polish it and just make the dialogue sing, make the action scenes work. So I got to work with a bunch of them, and they are not journeyman writers. These are not like early writers. These are people who are like, I understand deeply under the hood why story works. And to develop original films with them is a joy. It is like playing tennis with someone who's better than you. You just get better because they keep hitting the ball and challenging it. And you have to dig inside yourself to go, I think the next scene has to be this because we'll think about this. And when you finally get to that level that they respect you, it's a great feeling. Just like playing tennis with someone who's really good. It's like, this is really fun. So I miss breaking story with great writers. And the other thing I miss is when I do bump into friends from the old film days, a lot of the conversation from the old days is industry gossip. Like, oh, do you know there's this new director from Ecuador as a short film named Paulie, and she's taking meetings this week, the agencies, do you want to meet today? And I have none of that gossip anymore. So the conversations are a lot shorter. Or I have no script I read last night. I have no secret intel on who's meeting at CAA or UTA. So when I see people, it's usually catching up on like how my tech company is going, and then how's your career going? How many kids do you have?
I love it. So you've just become a normal person.
You know what? I think Laura, wifey, would disagree. She's, no, you're still insane, but normal-ish. Yes.
Okay, wait. So pre-show, we were talking, and I think it sounds like you're both a little insane, which is probably why you came together very nicely, right? So
Probably why we get along. Yep.
I love that. That's wonderful. Very cool. All right. So when you shifted from what you were doing to what you are doing,
Yep.
kind of what happened that caused that pivot and what have you chosen to do?
This was the thing that stood out for me is I was at Fox and I was working on a number of franchises where it is not heroes' work. To be honest, yes, you can be a senior vice president, you can be executive vice president of studio, whatever. It seems to me outside great sort of thing. But the studios at this point who feel like they've been under assault from social media, from games, all these things where it's like, oh man, our audience is being drained by people who are staying on their Xboxes and their PlayStations. Where in the old days, it was like you had to go to the movies. So being inside the studio, what that means when they feel like, oh, the audience is contracting. We're selling fewer tickets this year, so we have to get the exhibitors to jack up ticket prices to try and make more money for all of us, is that you fall back on the safest things. So that is why, yes, absolutely. Avengers 19 is going to get made before an original film. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because it's really easy to do the projections on Avengers 19. You have a lot of data to go, even if it sucks, this many diehard fans will see it, and then internationally will remarket it, blah, blah, blah. So I say all that because there's a moment at Fox where I was like, you know what? I'm working on a bunch of sequels. I will never, these will not be the ones that I tell my kids when they're like, Daddy, what did you do? I'm like, I made Die Hard 19. Bruce in the retirement home.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do I go back to doing something that is meaningful and not only meaningful to me, which is important, but also somehow affects the world in a way. And I've hunted around to like see what are the problems that I have and what are the things that are I feel like are holding me back from where I want to be. And that's what I've been working on for the past 5-6 years. Just that thought of what can I contribute that's valuable to me, but also to other people who are trying to do something with their lives and be happier, which is why I called it what I called it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, you referenced Die Hard, so I just have to tell you, Christmas is a big deal in our family.
It should be.
So here's our top 3 movie picks.
Ready.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Awesome.
The Grinch. And
Okay,
Die
good.
Hard. The original Die Hard.
The original Die Hard is a fantastic movie.
So all 3 of them get watched every Christmas season.
That's cool. That's great. You have these like rituals that it's Christmas.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So what do you do now? What is it? Because you fall back to that safety net and that what's the world ready to consume or how can I make a difference in the world? What is that?
I'll tell you, I started with what are problems that I have and what are solutions available? And if there's a solution for it, okay, great. But if there wasn't exactly, it was like, oh, that seems interesting, how to solve it. And I've been very lucky to have worked with friends to develop ideas around where I am. But it really came down to, I think, 3 key frustrations I had. One of them was, and this is going to sound like very maybe vulnerable or stupid, but I'm just going to be super blunt, is one of them is I noticed in the mornings I had a feeling of overwhelmed sometimes, like where do I start? There's so many things to do. Sometimes it was almost like paralyzing. And then that led me to feel like maybe I'll just spend 5 minutes doing this stupid activity, whatever, that was like a distraction or something, because I was procrastinating. Right. So that I wanted to solve that, going like, how do I get over that feeling of overwhelm and know where to start? Because once I got into it, then it started to feel good. Another one that was big for me is, and this was pointed out to me probably more articulately than I would put it, so I'm going to tell you how it was said to me, was I was talking to one of our members of the community that I built, this focus community, and I was talking to him and saying, I'm inside the bubble. I would love to hear your perspective on what is it that we do for you that's you pay us every month and you're part of this thing and I see you every day in there, right? And he said this to me. He said, I have a choice. At 3:00, I can be playing with my kids. Or at 6:00, I can be like, where the fuck did the day go? And he said, the difference is, did I open your app? It just keeps me on track for that. Oh, I'm going to be done early. And I was so happy to hear that because that was a problem that I had of having too many days where like at 6 o'clock, I'd be like, oh man, like how can it be 6 o'clock already? I've got all this. What happened? Where did the day go?
Yeah.
And that I wanted to solve that sense of where did the day go? And have those days instead where it's 3 o'clock going, oh, look, I want to go for a walk or I want to do something and feel good about myself. And the third thing I really want to solve was I had this recurring thing of at the end of the day, to-dos that I had to drag into tomorrow. I never got to this one. I never got to that. But in the morning, they felt doable. Like when I made my little list of what could get done, it was like, totally get this done.
Yep.
Those were the impetus for me to say, how can you get this solved? And that's where I started.
Nice. I love that. When I start working with people, we focus on what's the problem and what makes it a problem for you, right? And that's exactly, and what might seem to be a problem to me, you might think, oh no, I've got that, but here's what's right. And I tell people, you have to be honest with yourself because there's absolutely no way you can change anything in your life unless you're willing to change. And in order to know what needs to change, you gotta peel back the layers to look underneath to see what's really going on, not the social media flowery view, but what's that yuckiness underneath that people don't want to talk about. And I find it fascinating because I know you also help people with work-life balance and working in various ways and things like that. And the whole, so I was taking some college classes back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first accredited online college.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a class, project management, that I had 4 people in my team that were located all over the world. So I was in Minnesota, I had a person on the West Coast, I had a person in India, and I had a person in the UK.
Wow, that's a lot of time zones.
And 2000. Okay, so think about the technology in 2000.
How did you?
And email and coordinating and the free app to do it wasn't even video at the time, it was just audio over the internet. So it was free. And but that's when I first started learning how to work remotely. And I knew that I was going to be able to use that someday. And fast forward, I learned how to do engaging training remotely. So I was the person who was chosen by my different clients to teach the folks in India or in the different countries that helped with some of the software applications and different aspects of the work we did. And I learned how to do that, and I taught other people how to do that as well. And so what is it about that part of the work-life balance thing, and how do you help people figure out what's right so that they can have more joy?
You know what is interesting because I don't have a lot of friends that have worked both in film and TV, and film and TV and also in tech. And there are some learnings from film and television you wouldn't assume map really well onto modern life. Of I may be a writer, I may be a designer, I may be an engineer, I'm working from home or I'm working hybrid. And I want to maximize this so that I can get my work done really well, feel self-fulfilled, sukha, and then also have a life, have some balance, right? Have some mental health.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things is film for years has had this whole spectrum of writers who for a long period of time are working from home or working from a coffee shop, it's a process of creativity, to then the hybrid thing of, we're starting to put together this production. We have a skeleton crew. We have a production designer who's working on his or her own, but they're coming in for meetings right now and then. Like all these sort of location scouts, and it becomes this hybrid work thing. And then it is super in sync on set work where everyone shows up every day for 5 months. And then it goes back to being somewhat hybrid and then remote. And it's this interesting dance of at each stage respecting how creativity works, how people can accomplish what they need to accomplish. Some parts of it, let me be blunt, are grueling. Like when you're doing principal photography on one of these movies that's costing $125,000 a day, there is not a lot of mental health work-life balance, right? It is just you grit your teeth. People are paid well for it, but it is not like, let us have our yoga class today at lunch.
Right.
Quickly before the light's gone, we have to go shoot this. So the interesting thing for me is getting into the tech, especially with COVID and this whole like, oh my goodness, work from home. How are we going to do this? Was that, oh wow, there are established ways of working that kind of help inform today's work. Like the films thing, if you look at how each stage of that process works, you can say, oh, there's a lesson I can steal and use right now in whatever I do. Like a lot of my platform has a lot of bloggers and writers and copywriters, stuff like that. And it's very similar. I see how they use it to how the screenwriters that I worked with 5, 10 years ago use coffee shops, use working at home, use Zoom, things like that. So it's probably a very rambling answer to your question.
No,
Sorry
I love it. I love it.
But
yeah, no, I'd
is
never
really,
thought of that connection before. So that's really cool. And as you were talking, I'm like, oh, so that grueling part is like a go live and how
yeah,
everybody, so not only do you have a daily stand up, one of my clients was Dow Jones. Dow Jones, a lot of folks
yeah.
don't realize that a lot of that tech brain power comes out of Minneapolis. And the teams that I got to work with, yeah, and they would release code a couple of times a day.
Oh, wow.
And right? And so that synchronicity and that dance that they did, it was so amazing to watch these guys. And when they needed a break because it was like, okay, I can't solve this problem, literally they would go play ping pong because every now and then I would get hit by a ping pong ball. But it was the game.
It's important to take those breaks to let your brain just. One of the things in my platform we do is we encourage you to do like Pomodoros or whatever cycle you want, and you get points. You get rewarded for taking a break. Oh, I went for a walk. Oh, I had a glass of water. I looked out the window and let my eyes focus more than 16 inches away. You know what I mean? Like these things we encourage you to do because you're right. That game of ping pong, you come back, you're like, oh, I know exactly what I should write next, or I know exactly how to fix that bug in my code, or oh, you know what this should look like. Let me go pull up my Illustrator, my Photoshop, my Figma, my Canva, and fix that thing. So that is very, very true. And it's something, I'm going to tell you a funny story if we have a moment.
Yeah.
Do you have a moment? Okay.
Go ahead.
Where I learned about this kind of creativity when I was coming up, I was probably 17, 18 years old, and I started working while I was still in school in Hollywood at this agency that did trailers and music videos and commercials and things like that for movies. And it was a good getting my feet wet transition. And the head of the agency came to me one day and he said, hey, listen, that guy Bart, I think he would be good at writing trailers. And I was like, oh, Bart, the runner we have that drives tapes and film around Hollywood. He's like, yeah, I just have a sense of him. I was like, okay. So he said, why don't you give him something and see how he does? So of course, this is my boss's boss who's like chatting with me about signing trailers. So I was like, okay, great. So I met with Bart. I was like, hey man, here's a movie, take it home. Doesn't come out for months. You have lots of time to do that. So 2 days later, my boss's boss comes in and so how's it going? What did you give him? And I named this some Warner Brothers title I'd given him. He said, what else did you give him? I was like, he's never written a trailer before in his life. I'm not going to give him 2 trailers. Like,
right.
I want to stress
Focus.
He goes, no. He's like, Stevie, no. You need to give them 2 things because the part of your brain that's going to come with a great idea is only freed up when you have something else to focus on. Because you have to give him 2 movies because he's going to be watching one and have the idea about the other one. And it's just the way the creative brain works, which is why you're absolutely right. Sometimes you go and you play ping pong and you have the idea for what should happen in the next chapter of your book. It's weird the way it is. Or some people had it, there's a lot of research on this. Some people have that same phenomenon with driving. Because it occupies part of your executive mode network. So your default mode network can run more freely while the parents aren't like stopping it. And people have it showering. But it's often doing activities like that. It just frees you up to have that weird aha eureka moment.
It's those moments when we're on autopilot, like you mentioned, and it's our unconscious mind now because you're being taken care of here. You have that space to allow those epiphanies or those light bulb moments to appear. And then the key is capture them.
Yes.
So that you don't lose that.
That's exactly right. Sometimes they're very, evanescent.
That's wonderful. Okay, so who do you enjoy working with?
Let me ask you, do you mean in our work environment or do you mean people that I seek out as part of my team?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So one of the things for which I derive great joy is the community in Sukha, the app, is very diverse. So you have people who can post what they're working on, and other people ask them about it. Some engineer will be like, "Oh, I just launched this new website," and people are like, "Oh, post the URL. Let's go see it. Let's see what you've done." People talk about writing children's books, or people who are doing various things, and it's really fun to see that sort of engagement. So I like working with people who are doing a lot of different things, and it's fun seeing people I know don't know each other in real life becoming friends and supporting each other through this. Like I remember a couple months ago, this one guy posted that you can post what you did every day, like one thing, the most important thing you can post. He posted he finished his dissertation. All these people around the world were like, "Congratulations, Roy! We've been watching you work on that for months." And it was super cool. And he's, "Oh, thanks, guys." And that sense of community of we hold each other up, that I love. Now, in terms of the people who are actually working with me on my team, like I've been lucky to work with some really smart designers and engineers. A lot of the good things in our platform have been contributed by people who are like, "This is cool. Like, how can I help? What can I do?" Including some members who've DM'd me and been like, "Hey man, I love using this. I was thinking we should have a feature like this. Can I give you some code you can integrate in?" I'm like, "Thank you so much." So been very lucky with people who are just smart people, like who care, often do it because they just want to see it in the world, as opposed to they need to have money, they need to have this. They're just like, "I think this would be cool." And I'm very grateful for that.
That's really cool. That I always am amazed. My son, I'll never forget, he was like 7, 8 years old. I was building a website. He's, "Mom, I need a URL." I'm like, "What are you going to do with a URL?" I'm going to build a game. "You're going to build a game." Okay. So we talked about it, and I explained to him we're going to just create a wireframe, a straw dog of what the basics. I don't need to do that. And $5 for a URL. And I said, and we talked about the concepts and stuff. And so I'm like, "Okay, here's your URL." He got the name. He had the name. Your URL. It $5. So he gave me $5. He
Oh,
was
good. He's some skin in the game.
He was investing in his future.
Yeah.
And he was really excited for 2 days, and then nothing, which is at that age, it makes a lot of sense. However, now, like 20 some years later, he is building wireframes and he lays things out and he remembers those conversations back in the day where I had to go through these steps in order. And I'm always so amazed because, "Oh yeah, I shared this code with this person, or I helped this person improve this application." Or I'm like, "You just do that. Wow, I never." So I love that community of helping to improve for other people. That's really, so how did you come up with Sukha? How did you come up with, because first of all, not everybody knows Sanskrit. And because my son brings that to me, and I'm like, yeah, he's all these paths, and like, "So how did that happen?" Because you're way too much like my son. It's a good thing.
Another compliment.
Yes.
I'll tell you, it was a conversation. I got married about a year and a half ago. And during that period of my honeymoon, I was talking to Laura. I was like, "This is really great because for these 10 days, whatever it was, like, no one's going to bug me. No one, because when you're running a small company, you're always questions about, do we file our taxes? Or should we do this? Who bought the stamps?" There's a continual dialogue of. So I was like, this is so unique because no one's going to ask me anything like, "Steven's on his honeymoon, leave him alone." So I asked her, I said, "I really want to come up with a name for this that reflects what it is. And I don't necessarily want it to be like focus app number 14, right? Help you focus." Like this, there's so many names that maybe are great from a marketing point of view of like, they're descriptive and they say exactly what it is. Blue, green, focus app with buttons. Oh, okay. The name tells you what it is. I feel like there's something deeper to it, but I'm having a hard time. And so I said, "Do you mind if over the next week or 2 weeks, I want to talk to some of the people that have been part of this community and ask them, like, again, what is it that we do for you?" And this is actually where that quote I gave you came from. Was one of the members I was talking to who said that thing about at 3 o'clock I'd be playing with my kids. And like, "This is why I pay you, is because you helped me get there." So I talked to some of them, and I was lying in bed with Laura like one afternoon. And I was like, okay, so I've spoken to a bunch of people. Here's like what they've said to me. And I said, I think that guy who said that to me about the 3 p.m., 6 p.m. thing, the way I heard that was, the productivity is not the goal. It's like the path, that where we actually get him is to a happy place with his family, with his sense of self of being a good dad and having time to spend with his kids. knowing he's doing a good job at his work, but not wasting time with distractions, all those things that fill up your day where you're like, I didn't really get done my stuff. I'm frustrated at 6 o'clock. I was like, I feel like it's about happiness. It's about self-fulfillment.
Yeah.
And Laura and I met in yoga. I literally married the girl on the mat next to me 10 years ago. She was there. We started chatting. We got married. And so there are a lot of Sanskrit terms that we hear a lot. And when you have a daily yoga practice, you end up learning a lot of Sanskrit, these concepts around satya and truth and sukha and the sense of self-fulfillment. Laura was like, you should call it sukha. That's what you're talking about, is that sense of, I'm happy because I'm doing the thing that I'm meant to do. I'm doing it really well. I'm proud of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And sukha is interesting because it's happiness, but it's not, oh, I'm so happy I had this hot fudge sundae. It's so delicious. It's not like that ephemeral kind of like happiness. It's a deeper happiness of, it's 3 o'clock. I crushed it today and I get to go play with my kids. I feel like I'm in my lane doing the thing I'm meant to do. That's
life is amazing, right?
So I want to call it the happiness company, because I think ultimately that's what we do. And the path there is be focused, be productive, be healthy. Yeah. But what we ultimately get is that feeling of just, this is what I'm meant to do. And it feels really good because I'm good at it.
Nice. I love that. I love that. Okay. So you have quite a journey from your first newscaster to where you are now with that, in essence, a happiness app.
Very true.
So what are some of the points along the way where you were like, I'm going to do this thing. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm going to pivot and do this other thing now. So what were some of those points and how did you decide to pivot in the direction you wound up going?
A lot of it, I would like to tell you that in hindsight, I can ascribe all this deep thought to, but as I was living it, a lot of them were happy accidents. So this is where I am. Life gave me this thing in front of me. Okay. So let's not pretend like this is a master plan. Like when I was 4 years old going, I shall someday create sukha. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here's the deal. That tells me you pay attention to the signs that the universe is giving you.
Try and be open to it. This is very true. So like with coming to California, because I was raised in Northern Virginia, very suburban lifestyle with engineering parents, my dad going to IBM every day. There was definitely a moment when I got this offer from USC. It came out of the blue. I didn't know what USC was. I got the offer when I was young. I hadn't finished high school yet, and I hadn't thought about colleges really. And came out. They flew me out to LA. They're like, we'd love for you to come out here, blah, blah, flew me and my mom out. And there's something about the vibe of like being there. I was like, this is a whole world that's interesting to me of being in Southern California. It was very different than Virginia. Was very much everyone's dad worked for the government or worked for a contractor for the government, right? Yep. It was a very, very set thing. You should go to one of these schools. You will end up doing this sort of work as a contractor, as a consultant, as a thing, and blah, blah, blah. And coming to LA, I remember having this vibe more than any one conversation. It was a vibe of, what do you want to do? Which is very different than, you're in Northern Virginia, this is the path like you will take. You will end up working in one of these industries right here doing this, and it's gonna be great. You'll have kids and you'll have bikes on the streets and you'll have backyard barbecues, but this is the thing. And that was very much like, Mom, I think I want to do this. And my mom was super supportive, argued with my dad. And my dad was like, no, he should go to a New England school. He should do this thing. My mom was like, I think he should follow. He seems really passionate about this thing of going to California and figure out what he's going to do. And that was a big one where I watched my mom have that conversation about, go express who you are. And my dad caving and being like, okay, if you guys feel this strongly about this, I'm gonna let this go. My dad was raised very poor, immigrant in India, like no money, you need to work hard. And I got his work ethic, but I think the thing that scared him was, I wasn't very clearly, I am going to go be an engineer and I will make $75,000 my first job. I'll make 150 by the time I'm 28. You know, it wasn't that thing. It was like, I'm gonna go figure stuff out. That's not a plan. There's no plan. I'm gonna figure stuff out. Right? That was a big one. And I watched the way my mom navigated that for me, and she deeply loved me. She died not long after that, so I didn't have a long relationship with her in my adult life. But I remember when she navigated that for me, I was like, oh, wow, that's a thing. And then another important pivot in my life was when we had, by grace of God, and this is, again, you don't plan for this stuff, but we had won the Academy Award for Independence Day, right? For visual effects. And it's a group effort, a lot of people involved. But at the end of the day, we did win. And it was a big thing for my career. Like I raised $21 million in venture. A bunch of it came from certain awards you do get or some recognition you do get. So you can't sneeze at that and dismiss it. It's a thing when people are like, they won an Academy Award for this, they probably know what they're doing. There's a moment when, after we'd done Godzilla, we'd done Braveheart, a bunch of movies, I was thinking to myself, I'm going to wake up and be 30 years old and then be 40 years old. And I will be still a relatively well-paid guy making a piece of someone else's movie, just a well-paid factory worker, but ultimately a factory worker. Like, I'm not telling stories here. I'm getting scripts in and I'm making sure that the effects look good. That for me is a big moment. And when I talked to my two co-founders in that, it was like, I think I'm going to do something else. Their biggest concern right out of the gate was, are you going to be a competitor? Are you going to go start another company to do this because you don't want to work with us? And I was like, no, not at all. I think I want to go produce films. Like, I want to go find writers with ideas and help them get made way upstream from where we get involved. And that's my future. And it took a couple of years to get that going. There were a couple of years there of living off my savings and trying to figure out my way. But I think that was a really important one for me, of like, when I think about turning 30 and 40 and 50, am I just the effects guy?
Yeah.
Am I ever going to tell a story that I care about, or am I going to say handed stuff is just go manufacture this thing? So I think that's been a big one for me. Those kind of moments of, what does this mean for the future? Will I be proud of this decision?
And it sounds like you had a passion, but it wasn't a burning flame.
True.
And then all of a sudden you're like, but I want more. I want something. And you allowed that desire of what's next. How could this be more fulfilling, more fun, more passionate? How can I bring more to the world, is what I was hearing you say.
I appreciate you hearing that deeply in what I'm saying, because the thing that in my mind is the through line is that I love the experience when someone comes to me and goes, thank you, you made my life better in some way. I remember when I was doing the youth news show, and yeah, you were on TV every week. People have to, my mom and dad and I did this thing because we saw you were talking about it last week on the show. Da, da, da. That's a really nice feeling. Oh, I've contributed to some of your life. When I was producing visual effects, I don't know, we were deeply contributing to a lot of people's lives. But there were definitely like writers and directors and producers who were like, man, you enabled us to tell the story visually the way we wanted to tell it. And then when I got into film development, not just production, there was also a sense of, oh wow, we could make stories that really help people. And I remember that from my upbringing, because I saw a lot of movies with my parents. My dad wanted to see Indian movies, my mom wanted to see American movies. And there's that thing that there's something powerful about telling stories that helps people navigate their lives. And how many people have said, oh, this was my Jerry Maguire moment when I had to go follow. You know what I mean? There's some references there. Oh, it was like a scene out of Office Space or whatever. You go, that's an important way you help people. Go, let me tell you stories about what it's like to be human, what other people do with decisions, and maybe they affect your decisions. So that was super cool. But then as I mentioned to you, I had a moment of, I'm just working on sequels. My studio they care more about making this sequel than they do about an original movie. My position here is actually meaningless. It pays well, but it's meaningless. And that's when I was like, I need to do something where I can actually help people. And I can't tell you, like, what I talk to people in our community, in the super community, and they're like, oh, I feel better. I get my work done. I get rid of my procrastination or my distractions. Like, that makes me so happy. That's the kind of story I will tell Laura at dinner today, saying, oh, I spoke to this guy who's an accountant in Minnesota. Actually, we do have an accountant in Minnesota. You don't know each other. But, yeah. And I see her often in this thing. And there's another one in Oregon. And it seems so far for me to understand what it's like to be a CPA. But they're like, oh my God, like my time with my kids is so much richer because I have this tool to help me get through stuff. That makes me happy the way it did being 16 years old, 15, 16 years old on a TV show, and people being like, oh, I went to do that thing in the mall because I saw it on your show last week. That's the thing I love.
I love that. And what you were just describing is, in the end, we're all people. My dad, one of my favorite cliffisms is everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time.
I loved your cliffisms episode. Every one of them about treating people a certain way. That was a great episode.
Thank you. That was fun. Yeah, my dad, just like your mom, my dad was a huge part. He's departed, but he was such a huge part in shaping my life. And it's always about, you got to live life to the fullest every day, because you never know when it's going to be gone. And just really bringing that to life. And that's what I've been hearing, is that not only do you enjoy doing that, but you love to help other people do that as well.
It's very true. I should help other people listen to that episode because I listened to that in the car. And I could remember the drive because I kept nodding my head as you went through like the cliffisms. I was like, that's another one. Man, if everyone lived by these, like it would be a very nice world.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Yeah, he's pretty amazing. I mentioned I wrote a couple of books, and in fact, from October 29th of 2023 to October 29th of 2024, I published 2 books and was a contributing author to a third. The first 2 books are based on his way of life type of thing, which is really cool.
Right.
And then I reference them in my third piece. I'm like, yeah, and because it's when you do things like that that you realize who those influential people in your life are. And I think for me, and I'm curious on your take, for me, looking back and realizing how much my dad contributed to not only how I look at the world, but also some of the choices that I've made. And not everybody's going to agree with it, but they're not living my life. And so, have you found, I know your mom was one, but have you had key contributors in your life as well that have helped you shape this path you've gone on?
I have. I know that there's a story you told about being in the lunch line with your vice president or CEO or something, and when it all went down. And that story illustrated a point that led you into talking about clipisms and that this sort of thing. And I know that in retrospect, it's easier to sometimes make meaning of things that maybe just happened for a different reason or whatever, right? So I can tell you, I've had some mentors. A lot of the way I think was influenced by my mom when I was little, because she was very involved in our lives when she was alive. And when I was working in visual effects and advertising, movie trailers and all that, there was one of the heads of that company that just took me under his wing and absolutely I still hear in my head when I'm in meetings because he had an intuitive sense of people where he just deconstructed the meeting. And we would walk out and he's like, so what do you think Polly was asking about? I was like, oh, she wants to know that the trailer will be delivered by Tuesday. Da, da, da. He said, no, let me help you understand where Polly's coming from is he knows that Mike, the guy to her left, who's the vice president of this division, da, 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 is about to get fired, but Mike doesn't know that. And she's preparing for that event, which Mike is not preparing for because she knows the studio needs to get that movie out. Blah, blah, blah. So what's really happening there was not at all about, I need the trailer. She was establishing that she'll be responsible for these things in this period of time. And I was like, wow, how did you get that? You just need to keep watching and listening and keeping your mouth shut. And it's astounding what you will learn in that regard. So you have clipisms. I had maybe Gregisms in that in business, he was the one who really deconstructed work for me and did an amazing job of those sort of things. Just here's how you live in this world. And then really when I was at DreamWorks, there were 2 writers I worked with and they opened up story to me. I thought I understood what story was. And I realized I understood what a car was, but I didn't really understand the way like gasoline combusted and moved a piston, which then had a cam and this and
the workings.
It's got a variable speed. All that's they were the ones who were like, let me explain that to you. And whether you want to use an electric, vehicle or a combustion engine, it was just that sense of wow, that was amazing. And when you were talking about Die Hard, have you ever seen the movie Taken?
Yes.
Yeah. They're the same movie.
You're right. Well, we're noticing. We're noticing patterns. Yep.
Exactly. And when you really like deconstruct something like that, you say, oh, these are movies about strong male figures whose egos are threatened because they've lost the love of the female figure in their life.
Yep.
And they've lost that love to another strong male. And they're thinking, wow, how do I regain that thing that I need so much? The affectionless female, whether it's my wife has gone to LA to go work for these rich Japanese guys. I'm a poor street cop. I can't compete on money. I can't compete on fancy watches. I can't, or whether it is, oh, my daughter I've lost to the new stepdad who's buying her ponies and I can buy her like a little radio set thing, right? Yeah. And both of those movies are fundamentally wish, but this is going to sound a little heretical, but you could say oh, it's this horrible movie about like Bruce goes to pick up his wife and like terrorists come and they're gonna blow up the building and it's awful. This guy's daughter is kidnapped and it's terrible. These guys have a sex ring going and they're gonna take her to the Middle East and right. You say it's terrible, but I would offer you this thought, which is when you understand deeply what's happening there, those movies are wish fulfillment for the hero.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bruce says, and this is on an unconscious level that I think it's received, Bruce says, I can never compete with these rich Japanese guys who just built a building or running a bank or whatever it was. Da, 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 da. And I've lost my wife. She is looking at them with so much respect because they are wealthy. Da, da, da. But you know what? If she were in danger and I could use my skills of jumping and running and kicking and shooting to save her, she would love me again. Mm-hmm. And he manifests the terrorist so that he can be the hero and get his wife back. Liam manifests his daughter getting kidnapped because but if you needed me to kick and jump and shoot, save you, you would love me again, not the guy who bought you the pony. So that may seem like the worst thing possible that happens to them, but it is absolutely their wish to go, I know you would love me if. And that's what the movie happens. That's what happens in the movie. So there's stuff like that I think is like super interesting when you think about how, those are constructed, and they teach about life, of the things that you do. Are you manifesting procrastination because you're afraid of success? Are you standing in your own way? And if so, what are the tools and the habits that are help you get over yourself? And that's a lot of what I try and do now.
Nice. And overwhelm, you were talking about overwhelm earlier, and that is lack of clarity. Right? And we procrastinate because we have some lack of clarity. And so it all goes back to that clarity and what do you really want? And I would agree with you that we will manifest what we believe we need to fulfill that heart's desire, whether we realize what we're doing or not.
Completely agree. Your unconscious mind, your spirit manifest stuff. Your conscious mind has no idea what's happening. And your spirit is, this is what we're going to make happen. Yeah.
Yep. My daughter, so my kids buy me stuff. I told you about the hot pads earlier. And so my kids buy me stuff all the time. They're like, oh, mom would like this. And she was at a craft fair. This was before the holidays. And so right over here, I have a little sign that says, manifest that shit. And right. And when I look at it and I think, okay, what that means to me is get really clear on what I want to bring in my life so that there can be focus to make it happen instead of just random stuff. And that ties back to you and I both we're some version of Forrest Gump, I think, because you pay attention to the signs, right? And then you watch how things unfold, and then what's the next stepping stone? And both of us have had interesting careers that have led us to places we never imagined, and we've been able to help millions of people we've impacted millions of lives around the world.
Right.
And we're not done.
That's true.
Very
hoping to get lots of chocolates if that's going to happen with Forrest Gump. I don't know. Let me know.
I love it. I'm that person that sticks my finger in the bottom. Yeah, no, don't like that one.
Oh, you're my wife. Yeah. No, I find that. I was just like, oh, she didn't like the coconut filling one. Okay, got it. Thanks for putting it back, though. Right.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Steven, this has been wonderful. Okay, so how can people get your app?
Easiest place is it is a public app. It's called thesukha.co, the Sukha Company. So if you go to www.thesukha.co, not com, but the Sukha Company, thesukha.co. You can try it for 14 days free. We made it to help people, and everyone that reaches out in DMs and group chats about what they've done that day and how they've gotten stuff done just warms with my cold little heart.
I love that. That's wonderful. So this show is going to come out on the 19th of March. Great. And so I will make sure that we put the URL so that people can access and try the 14-day so that they can start to see how their lives can become more self-fulfilling, more happiness, more joy.
That'd be super fun. Thank you.
I love that. Very cool. Last question, because we both have to get to our next adventure.
Yep.
If you were to go back in time and give that younger Steven, let's just say he's a middle schooler, some words of wisdom, what would you tell him?
Oh, the net is closer than you think.
Mm.
Because having been through one successful exit and two failed companies where I just wanted to kill myself, I was like, I can't go out, I can't talk to anyone. Like financially, it was really hard, and somehow got through it.
Yeah.
Looking back, I realized that my fear was about the shame of failure, about the shame of being poor, of losing a lot of money trying to do things. And yeah, what I tell myself is the net is closer than you think. Go do things. As long as no one gets hurt, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. You can get through this. You can always get through
Exactly
this.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Steven, this has been a joy. Thank you so much for being on my
Thank you
show.
for having me.
I love it. And listeners, I hope that you have enjoyed our conversation, taken some nuggets that will help you on a daily basis, start to live into your best life even more each day. Bring a little of that joy, your sukha, back into your life. And until next time, please follow the show, subscribe so that you get us in your box every week, and share it with some of your friends, some of the people that you feel could benefit from a few Cliffisms or even some Stevenisms. Until next time, thank you so much. Enjoy living into your best life and have fun with that adventure.
Thank you for listening to Polyskaya, your show host for Live Into Your Best Life. Check out the show notes and visit her at polyskaya.com to learn more and continue your journey. Until next week, enjoy the adventure.